What's up, everybody? It's Brandon, aka Mothman, with Run It Back, here with Upmind. We did a special interview with Zesh from the EU region with Naeem NK Rosinski, and now we're kind of following up on that with some NA topics, NA discussion with Upmind here. So I appreciate having you here. It's awesome to get to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, so let's just kind of start with a bit about you. Who is Upmind? What got you into Valorant?
So first of all, my name is Gus. I come from Counter Strike, mainly. I've been around esports for like 4 or 5 years, I want to say. Just dabbling in a lot of different stuff early on in my career. When I was like 16, I was looking for like side hustles in the industry. So like being a streamer, being a manager, graphics designer, all that. And one of the first things that I tried was casting, and that ended up taking all of my attention. That ended up taking my passion away for pretty much everything else. I knew what I wanted to do as a career at like 16 when I first started casting. So yeah, and then coming from Counter-Strike, that was an easy transition, right? Valorant has been mega fun for me thus far. I love the game. I love how fun the community is thus far. And in terms of like the competitive community, we're now starting to get like more spiciness, I think. More or less like like the crazy player swap off season that we've been wanting, at least for this last year. So there's a lot of things coming to like culmination now in Valorant from what I used to experience in Counter-Strike, and it's pretty fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely be getting in some of those player swaps and the transfers and stuff later for sure. But as you came in, obviously you're on the younger side of the Valorant talent pool. We saw you at the LCQ. You've done some pretty big events so far. I still want to know, what kind of room for growth do you feel like you still have?
I feel as if right now I can only go so far, because again I feel as if my skill set is still building up in comparison to the other people that I'm trying to compete with. That's like one thing that not a lot of people can put into perspective. I went from like tier 2, tier 3 Counter-Strike, working like collegiate events, like, once in a while I get a decent enough paycheck that it pays my rent for the month. But now it's different. I'm fighting with like casters who've done like CS:GO majors like 4 or 5 times. Like I'm competing with people that have been in the esports industry for like almost 20 years. Like, how do you do that? How are you even that old that you're in esports for 20 years? So like I feel like I have a lot more to go. But I'm slowly taking in all of the experiences as we go and hopefully improving through that.
Okay, and that kind of leads right into the next question I have. Some of those veterans that you said have been in the scene for 20 years. You share the desk with some of them. Obviously, have interacted with some of them. How kind of welcoming have they been? Even though I know you're kind of competing for jobs with them.
Yeah. It's tough, right, for them, because I would like to think that they are mainly looking to compete with me for a job, but in terms of hospitality, in terms of being as open as possible to feedback or any sort of tips or advice, like absolutely. I want to say pretty much every caster in the scene has just accepted one another, not just, of course, as competition, but also, of course, just as a business partner. We all know that we're probably going to have to work with each other one day, so we might as well be nice to each other, but that's not, of course, the regular motive. DDK, he's always been on that forefront in terms of casting. I had always tried to communicate with him in sort of like a mentor type position, but here in Valorant, it just got so much bigger. He was able to become so much more connected with the game, and of course, I could approach him with any questions that I have in terms of like whether it just be like a question about a team or a question about like even my rates. We're that open with one another that we can, that if we have more or less like a ballpark estimate of our, of what we're getting paid, we can ask, each other for that type of advice. We're at that level, I guess. So yeah, honestly, being able to learn around the veterans has been, man, it's been really fun. It's humbling, at least for me, who was like a fan like less than like 2 years ago.
That's awesome. Obviously, you're on the come up. And you might even be at a high point right now with what you've been working on and everything. So it's really awesome to get to talk to you and to hear your thoughts on everything. Kind of a fresh perspective. We've seen the people that have been around the block and everything like that, but this, in some sense, is kind of your first rodeo.
Yeah,
So
a
it's
little
really
bit.
awesome, like I said, to hear that fresh perspective on everything. So that kind of just moves us right into the current happenings in the NA scene, something that I would say probably shocked everybody. I know I was surprised. I was having dinner and I put everything down and I said, "Hold on, honey, I gotta write something. I'll be right back," to my wife. And that was when Sentinels announced Raucus as their
Mm.
coach. What do you think of that?
Man, quite the move, right? Because we just went through LCQ and Raucus alongside like I don't want to say everyone else in phase because Baby J was very much like in more or less like a neutral position, just like, oh yeah, I think the future for the team is gonna be all right, but like Raucus immediately after LCQ, he's talking like, oh yeah, we disappointed the organization of phase, and I know that we could do better. All things that were more or less like talking about the future, talking like what is his team going to do to try to change things in the future. Um, so when the news came out, it's weird, right? It's weird. So overall, my thoughts on Raucus joining the team. It's not exactly I think a bad move for Raucus currently in his career. I feel as if FaZe, of course, they're going through a whole restructuring anyways. I feel as if Raucus wanted to end up on another top 10 team, that would be a little difficult, at least for him and his current skill set, because I know that teams are starting to value IGLs and coaches a lot more, which again makes total sense to why he took the Sentinels role. But yeah, maybe it might be too early in his career. I really don't know, because a lot of people they try to go into coaching or they try to go into managing, and it's quite hard to make that jump back. So I don't really know how committed Raucus actually is to this role, in a long-term position. But in terms of how smart the player actually is, I mean, that's literally what he's known for. He would be picked over better players in Overwatch League, but he would get picked over purely because he would be a better leader, or he would at least be better mentally composed in the server in comparison to his opponents. So yeah, honestly, when he was on phase, I would like to think that someone with Raucus's skill set could have been able to, help the team. But maybe we might see a more amplified Raucus, I guess, or we might see more of course, his mindset when he steps back into that coaching role. But yeah, definitely a shock. Nobody could have ever predicted this.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thoughts on the situation. We didn't see it coming. What can he bring to the table? But then you kind of look at it with him on phase. They played Sentinels, countless amount of times.
They
He
did.
knows the team. He knows what they're capable of. You have, Shazam, who's doing kind of all the legwork and
Mhm.
playing, and now he can kind of take a step back and focus more on getting the team in shape, in the server rather than outside of it with Raucus in that coach role. I kind of feel like who knows, how to play better than the players. You have your coaches and analysts who can look at
Yeah.
all the data and everything like that, but unless you're actually in the thick of it, you might not truly know how things operate. I think it's a huge move. I
Yeah.
think he's going to do great.
Yeah, great point. Because I mean, we are now having coaches from Counter Strike that I think could work a lot for Valorant. One coach at least, or at least we've seen multiple coaches already. We saw Emma Putty, we saw MCE. We've seen coaches, at least for me from CS, that I thought would be really good for Valorant, that I thought would be really proactive and could honestly help out their team in such a significant fashion that it could help them be in that top 5 position. But we've seen teams make those types of coaching decisions, like FaZe, even perfectly like FaZe, where they haven't been able to really convert that into progress. We'll see that over time, because clearly it's very much a structural decision, especially with someone like JDM and now Raucus coming in. Hopefully, he's part of the Sentinels process for even longer. But yeah, no, thinking about it on just the tournament basis, Shazam does need to kind of like take a lot more weight off of his own back, because I would like to
Yeah.
think that him alongside maybe one other player on the team are taking on the brunt of in-game IGLing, and then of course off the server work. It's very hard, like taking that whole brunt by yourself, not having someone else try to schedule practices for you, scrims for you, organizing your practices for you. I mean, it feels a lot better as a player because you get to control everything. But realistically, in comparison to every other coach, Raucus is coming into this with playing experience, something that no other coach can say. So Raucus now at this point, he knows what the players are like. He knows that Shazam needs some weight off of his back. So now at this point, I'm just trying to see what sort of coach is Rockets going to be. Is he going to be a bit more like an assistant coach and just try to help out with like more of just the process of the team, I guess, and just trying to help out more just the day-to-day function? Or is he really trying to change how this team works, how this team tries to function in terms of strats? Because Sentinels needs that change. You know, they're no longer the immortal Sentinels. They're no longer the world-beating team. If anything, we're calling Gambit that now. So if Sentinels needs that leg up, they're picking up a coach for a good reason. Hopefully it works out.
Yeah, we'll have to wait, until Champions to see. But in the meantime, like you said, FaZe, they've been kind of rumored to rebuild completely. We've just saw NRG sign Hayes. I wrote that piece for Run It Back. It was 13 minutes on the Twitter stamp after TSM announced Hayes was leaving that he got signed by NRG. And then we saw the guard was revealed with their 3 players. What kind of news in terms of player transfers, teams signing or dropping stood out to you kind of the most recently and might have the biggest impact? 1, 2, maybe even 3 if you think there are, that will obviously work out.
Yeah, there's quite a few in the scene. Finally, right? We get to talk about like just crazy breaking news every day. I think one news that just wasn't surprising but is going to very much affect the scene. Your boy Dre, at least for me, is one of the better duelists in all of North America. But does that actually come down to his consistency though? We'll see in what he actually wants to take his career, like what direction he wants to take his career in. Because looking at the tweet that he actually made, to be looking for a team, he said that he actually wants to flex now and actually play smokes. What? Right? Like, he was, again, one of the best secondary / main duelists in NA, at least to me. But your boy Dre, at least in terms of Valorant, I feel like Valorant can actually be a lot more chaotic and honestly a lot more you have to manage too many different things, honestly, if you are a duelist on that front line. And I don't think a lot of people can actually take on that brunt in terms of utility. I feel as if a lot of players can actually have more versatility if they stay back and they take on a bit more of a flex role. Like, for example, when we ended up seeing a lot of secondary duelists move away from just playing either Raze or Reyna and just moving straight up over towards the sky. And I feel as if a lot of players, they have that skill set to be able to offer to this game, but they're still stuck in, certain roles that their team stuck them in. So your boy Dre, I'm very excited to see what sort of other roles that he can pull out, because his examples, at least off the duelists, he hasn't shown just any secondary roles, period. I think all the way back before he played maybe the occasional Sage and the occasional Omen, but at least for LCQ, we only saw that duelist version of your boy Dre. So if anything, I'm excited to see him in the future, see what team he ends up landing on, because every team wants him, I think. Not every, excuse me, I can't say that. But almost every team would like him. I could see him fitting in on pretty much every team outside of the top 2, top 3, and I'm excited to see where he goes. Now, in terms of the other moves in the scene that I'm sort of excited for, I guess I'm more excited in the macro of what is the guild. I think it was called. Is that what it was?
The guard. Yeah, with Sam and Valen and Net. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a good sign because I like the players, first of all. Net and Valen, to me recently, have really been popping off, and I miss Psalm in general. But kind of just the Cronky Sports and Entertainment project to me is really good point in the right direction for Valorant as an esport. Because we're all aiming towards I don't want to say all, but I think we're aiming towards franchising in a few years, right? And this is one of those steps, because you have projects like Version 1, who of course at the beginning was made as a franchise, and of course V1 just helps out that brand a lot. And I would like to think for KSE, the guard is just going to help their bid in staying in Valorant whenever those negotiations end up coming out. And you could almost associate that with potentially the efforts of teams like Misfits, of efforts of teams like even Anbox at this point, trying to cling on to a roster. So there's a lot of reason for a lot of organizations to come into Valorant now. So that's just another reason to watch out for the off season, right? See what new orgs pop up, see what new players start to go to which orgs. But I think the guard in general as a lineup, we should actually be looking out for, because again, I just enjoyed watching Net when he actually played up with Andbox and Knights. Of course, same thing with Valen when he played on Complexity. So yeah, just an interesting project in general. I feel like Valorant's gonna get a lot of weird announcements like that. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for random stuff like that.
Okay, well, we've seen plenty of big time organizations jump into the game. We got Cloud9, we got TSM. You look at Sentinels, Envy, like G2. NIP moving to Brazil now. We have a ton of high profile organizations in Valorant.
Brazil, NIP.
Are there any organizations that you can think of off the top of your head that aren't in Valorant yet that you would like to see join the esport?
Man, honestly, I don't think so. I think in the grand scheme we got all the I think we got most of the orgs that work in tactical FPS, because like at least to me, those are the orgs that I want to see actually like at that franchise level, at that front foot level. As much as I like more money being put into the scene, as much as I like the new brands, I just kind of want the OG names, and I want I guess you could say rosters that's not rosters, but at least companies or groups that I at least know is very much invested in the scene in general as a whole. But I digress. I think organizations like Cloud9, like TSM, like G2, they have their place and they're going to stay. But in terms of other organizations that should be jumping into Valorant, I feel like they should be a little bit more hesitant, because we have so many. We have too many. And whenever franchising does actually come in, we're only going to have about like 7 spots for actual franchise teams, I think. So I don't that's per region, of course, but I don't exactly know what the worth now is for organizations to come in and try to steal away one of those bottom spots, because we have a solid top 8, top 10 in terms of organizations already in Valorant. If anything, you would be looking to like beat down like one of the orgs like Rise that may not have as much infrastructure, right, but that still has like a sick roster. So yeah, I feel as if organizations should stay a little bit wary from actually coming around to Valorant. Others that I don't exactly remember, man, who hasn't come over to Valorant? Do you have any off the top of your head? Because I don't.
Yeah, looking at the green screen behind you makes me think of the green wall. Green wall. I mean, the Optic brand just by itself. I mean, you look at Optic. I come from a Gears of War. I come from a Gears of War background, and they had the winningest console esports team in history for Gears of War. Just the brand from Call of Duty all over. I mean, I know they just had kind of their merger with Envy for the CDL and everything, but I think just having a team in Valorant labeled Optic would just be huge, just because, just because of the name behind it.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that would add a little bit more legitimacy also to the scene, but I think we're already good, right? I think we already have all of those tier 1 names. But yeah, if there's ever a brand that would like to come over, Optic, the green wall, come on down. I'm good. I would like that.
Yeah, and like we said, we have some big organizations who have teams in different esports all over. G2's not just, an EMEA or a EU team, their Valorant teams there, but they have teams all over. You saw NIP, they were in EU and now they're moving to Brazil. So it's really cool to see these big organizations say, okay, I'm going to, maybe have a Chinese team for League of Legends or something like that, but have a North American team for Valorant or another esport, or
like the Gen G route.
Exactly, or the
T1 route.
Yeah, some Russian players for Fortnite or something like that. Just be spread all over. Just be actually like a worldwide organization. It's really cool to see them step into Valorant.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. When you're talking about your boy Dre, in terms of roles on a team. Early when I started, interviewing people and stuff, I would always ask them what they thought of versatility in Valorant, because we saw kind of a lack of it at the start. But then you have people like Sick, who would play a different agent on every map. He'd play a best of 5 and he'd play 5 agents. And so I would say, how important is it to be versatile? So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on being able to play more than one role and who you think might be some of the best at that in the current state of Valorant.
Yeah, I think first of all, versatility in every video game that has multiple characters. Yes, it absolutely is important. You could be a main all you want, but there's always going to be a counter to that piece of utility. There's always going to be a possible counter from your opponents. So you always have to know a different character, period. You always have to know something else just so you could have that spice, just so you could have that versatility to your team. Because like in complete honesty, in Valorant, all of the agents, they do take a while to master, but because of how the professional system actually is, like you realistically master that character in that whole scene or in that whole environment within like a month and a half. Like just to look at Nitro, like every character that he needed to master, he mastered, and now he's like a Swiss Army knife now. Now he is like a multi-rolled player, and if anything, I would actually have to mention him as being one of those players, Zeppa as being one of those other players. Although Zeppa didn't actually pull out too many other characters in LCQ, that's hey, it just is what it is. He has it in the back pocket. The team decided to go with KO, but they know that they can utilize him for pretty much anything else that they could possibly need, especially going forward and especially in the middle of a tournament. It just adds a little bit more flexibility. I don't see why not learning other characters, learning other rules. At least for me, I come from fighting games. That's literally what we're all about. We're all about the counterplay. We're all about, learning as many different ways to fuck around with your opponent as possible. Sorry, sponsors. But like, it's just one of those things where if it's an option, if you're playing a certain role, like especially if you're playing like Cypher, why wouldn't you learn Killjoy? If you're playing Sky, why wouldn't you learn someone like Phoenix? Like, you know what I mean? There are so many, at least, connotations that you could do. So yeah, I don't even think that this is a rant. I think most pro players know this. I think most pro players know that having that variety is incredibly important at that top tier scene. But one day, I think one day we're gonna go back to seeing more one track minded metas with one character, at least like a layout of like 5-6 characters that works for that specific lineup. But for now, Valorant is very much freestyle, I think, and you can seriously rock a combination of almost any of the 5 roles and any of the 5 characters, and it could work. It could work reasonably in this game.
Well, I kind of had this pegged for later, but you mentioned the meta, so I kind of want to shift the conversation that way.
What
then
is the meta?
we have Chamber. He was revealed, obviously being delayed, so he probably won't be featured at Champions. Still, we'll see him added to the agent pool eventually. Then we have Fracture added to the list of maps. We saw that huge like month-long post-plant meta where version 1 took it to Iceland, where they would sit back on Haven and just lob stuff to the spike. Now with the meta, that's kind of cooled down. We're still seeing the Astra. Really don't see the Omen at all. Brimstone here and there on certain maps. So a lot of the meta revolves around switching out the controller, agents and everything like that. Chamber, he'll be a Sentinel. I just want to know what you think on the evolution of the meta thus far. Where do you think it's going to go once we see Fracture used in pro play, Chamber being added to pro play? What do you think of these competitive contests once the meta continues to shift?
Yeah, I think our meta is changing with the fact that, of course, updates coming by, changing the agent pool. I think that's incredibly important going forward. That we have even a game that we have a developer that is as proactive at changing up the agents. So we're gonna have to just keep an eye on that going forward. In terms of the overall changing in agents, I kind of enjoyed seeing how people have perceived like Sage. Like, how does she actually work in this game outside of being a little bit more of an anchor, and of course just filling up for that heal role. But we're getting maps like Icebox, where it seems so perfect of a map for Sage, but teams are beginning not to use it. And again, that's just for good reason. A lot of characters or a lot of agents in Valorant have a lot more versatility, and they have a lot more util dump. I guess you could say possibilities than per se a character, or excuse me, I keep saying character agent like Sage. But I think that's the point, right? I think that's the point. Each player, depending on what the team is feeling and depending on what they're feeling going into a different game, they can change up that role, I guess, that middle controller role, without affecting too much of the team's actual flow. because if you do change up that first duelist role, like pretend you take someone off of the jet, that's going to change up the pacing. That's going to change up ultimately the timing of your actual takes. Now, of course, when it comes down to some of the controllers, though, a lot of that is literally just util dump. You're dumping that early on in the round no matter what. So, doesn't really depend on timing and really just depends on positioning and usage. So again, such a versatile game, such a versatile time. And the meta over time, it's going to continue to go. But I feel as if every agent currently in Valorant has a position in the meta, has a position that they can fill. Like, again, Brimstone could absolutely be utilized because realistically, if you think about it from a defensive point of view, Brimstone realistically just needs to delay time for his teammates to get there. That's all that a controller is there for, to control time, to control space. And if you end up putting down one smoke, one molly in front of a choke point, that is easily going to allow time for at least one or two of your teammates to rotate. And at that point, you'll have enough util to try to cover up the second space of that. You don't even need a Cypher on that front line with like a tripwire. You don't need a shit ton of utility on that front line to make it work, to make that role work. So yeah, the meta is always going to change, at least for me. We'll see individual players start to shine on agents that we simply don't expect all the time. But that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it. I love it when things change because that just means it's more things to study.
Exactly, and it's more things to watch. A fresh take, seeing things that are exciting. You mentioned Brimstone. We saw Gamond GMD,
Brimstone Gaming
we saw him on Breeze just absolutely pop off with Brimstone. Here and there we see a Yoru. I know it's kind of like the special treat we get when Yoru gets picked. Like the whole room explodes, but then nothing happens because of it.
Right. I'll go back on what I said earlier. Almost every agent. Almost. Yoru.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
You can leave for a second. We'll see after another update. We'll see.
Well, let's move on to the LCQ now. We saw some surprises. FaZe Clan being put out in kind of a joint last place. Rise going insane,
doing their thing,
and then Cloud9 Blue, who were a favorite, but many thought we'd probably see 100 Thieves just run away with it. First I want to hear your thoughts on, did you think Cloud9 Blue would walk away with that last champion spot, especially after they lost to Rise the first time around?
No, I don't even think they did. Simply speaking, I thought that everyone going into the tournament had an even chance of taking it away. So, I mean, in the end, it could have been Cloud9. It could have, no matter what their winners run was, no matter what their losers run was. I saw every best of three going in more or less like a 55-45 or a 60-40 direction, something possible for the teams to try to come up from. One thing that intensely surprised me was just 100 Thieves and how just stale they looked at times. And, maybe you can contribute that to the changing of rules. Maybe you can contribute that to Boy coming in and staggering up a bit of the comms in comparison to what they used to do before. And, of course, you can contribute the whole online portion of things because, man, that sucks. That really sucked. Yeah. It really did make a difference. A lot of teams who were feeling really good day one just did not look the same online. Like Luminosity, especially like Luminosity and FaZe, especially if they were going for like a last ride type thing, like a last dance, and they knew that their rosters were going to change after the tournament, they would go all out on LAN. It's that environment that just fits them mentally. FaZe Clan had always had experience on LAN. Luminosity, you saw Mac, you saw the clips. He was yelling, he was screaming for the first round. They were perfectly ready for that whole situation. So I feel as if a lot of teams could have just been that explosive out of nowhere if we had just stayed in that environment. But online, Cloud9, they had always proven themselves to just be mentally better. And that's just the type of fertility that you need to have for a long bracket run. And, all five of the players for Cloud9, they're all very much insanely talented players. They're all top quality. In terms of their actual play against Rise, it was the sweep that we were at least anticipating against Rise throughout the entire tournament, and we finally saw it in that grand finals. I think C9 did take more or less a rightful place in NA at that top 3 spot. Because like again, 100 Thieves in the direction that they're going now, they certainly do not deserve to be at that top 3. Cloud9 does. And yeah, after at least the result, after seeing the games, I'm convinced that Cloud9 at least has a direction. Now, are they going to, explode and do great at Champions? I don't exactly predict so, but can they absolutely do so? Do they have the momentum to do so? I think so.
Yeah, I have to agree. You hate to see 100 Thieves kind of fall off the way they have, because that's, as we spoke about organizations, that's an organization that if they're doing well, eyes are on the brand. Eyes are on Valorant. Viewership goes up with 100 Thieves in their place. But with Cloud9, they took a while. We saw them, they had 10s, and then they lost 10s. They had so many iterations of the team. We kind of like a T1 situation. You saw them at the beginning of Valorant look incredible the first couple months in the beta with the smaller tournaments and everything like that. Then more teams started to come in and get their practice in and start understanding the game, and towards the end of 2020 they were nowhere to be found, in terms of the top echelon of teams. And now here they are, finally they have everything in place, and I think it's awesome to see that Cloud9 Blue stuck in there, because we have Cloud9 White as well, two huge teams in both their respective forms, just from the same organization. It took them a bit, but they kept with it. They stayed in Valorant, and obviously paid off.
Yeah, it paid off, and I think loyalty is going to fit kind of a good theme for this year, because a lot of the teams that stuck together for the longest time were the ones that succeeded the most. Even Gen G that were trying their absolute damnness to just keep a core together. I mean, they fell apart, and we saw exactly what happened. We saw XSET stick together with their core, and they were able to still stick around to like a top 3, top 4 spot in NA. 100 Thieves did the same thing. We saw Cloud9 finally do the same thing by the very end, only making more minor choices, I guess. The thing to me, though, is that Cloud9, they always had at least the direction to me that they wanted to stick with a 5-person team, that they want a long-term plan. And Floppy, I think, was supposed to be that plan. It's just that him personally, he just wasn't feeling it. So yeah, Vanity at a perfect spot in his career. Version 1, they absolutely need a leader, and it's unfortunate that, Vanity left them at the time that they did. But, Cloud9 now is just more solidified. Players all have chemistry together, and we're going to see that make that difference in NA over time, especially next year. The teams that stick together are going to succeed the most, I think. And that starts at the very bottom, to the tier 2 teams making ass loads of moves every week. What are you doing? What are you doing? How is that going to bring you VCT success? Like at all? Like what? You think like the DZ one, like for like one rake is gonna work? Like that's gonna work? Rise, it took them super long with a random lineup to finally make it up, and they still had to change out players before VCT. Dude, why do you think the whole team needs to change before a big tournament? You don't need to. It just doesn't need to happen. It's the same thing as like changing up your config, like your sends before a game. Like why? Like you don't need to. You're used to one thing. You might as well build up on it. Rant over. I think the free agent market in Valorant is going to become more versatile even in the future. But that's not the direction I want to see it go. And teams like C9, they're going to stay at that top because they're going to stick together, I think.
Awesome. Sorry for getting y'all riled up there.
I know. It didn't seem like a topic that would get me riled up, but like seeing so many young players lose out on so many opportunities. This also includes you, Immortals, for any reason whatsoever, kicking off young, promising players just because they feel as if the lineup could go in a randomly better direction from week to week. Just blows my mind.
Yeah, speaking of, free agents, I just want to give a shout out to Jammies. I cannot believe he didn't get a spot somewhere after Iceland. I spoke with him at an interview. My first interview of Iceland was with Jammies. Awesome guy. Hell of a player. If we're talking about free agents, I've got him at the top of my list.
Yeah, Jammies, at least, he's a player that so many teams need at the moment, especially at his role being the super versatile defensive pick, whether that be on the site for the KJ or of course his signature Viper now at this point. But yeah, when it comes down to Jammies, I am mega surprised that no other team was able to poach him. Him going to Pioneers, I guess that works, because at least to me, that group of 5 players had always, at least throughout this year, had always shown some sort of shine to him, some sort of glimpse of hope. And if Jamie sticks to that roster though for more than like 3 months, I might just pull some of my hair out because he deserves to be on like a top 10 team. He deserves to be on a top 8 team. And I'm sure like FaZe could think about it, Gen G could think about it. There's a couple teams that could think about Jamie's for sure.
Well, let's wrap this up with further down the timeline, looking at champions. North America going to the champions. We have Sentinels, Team Envy, and Cloud9 Blue. Obviously, those are some powerhouse organizations in all of esports, especially in Valorant at this point. Wicked players on the roster. I know you got love for Brazil, but be honest with me, aside from potentially Gambit and maybe Team Liquid, the way that they've been looking, what's it going to take to stop an NA team from winning the whole thing?
What's it gonna stop? What's it gonna take to stop an NA team? I think at this point, just the preparation that most teams have for Envy and Sentinels, I think should be thrown out. Should be, hopefully. I have not heard good things from the Sentinels camp when it comes to practice. But I think now in the direction that they're trying to go with Raucus, considering how drastic and how soon the decision actually seemed, because it didn't seem like, again, Raucus just 2 weeks ago had an idea that he would be going off in such a wildly different direction out of FaZe. But maybe that was him being a good liar. But even then, Sentinels, I at least think have a lot to work on. And that's mainly going to come through their micro adjustment and their evolutions against other teams. How are those counter picks going to go down? How is the straight up just the counter stratting period? Because that's one thing that we haven't seen too much of in Valorant, which is just straight up counter stratting. And I think we're going to see that a lot in Champions. If there's any team that I think to me has that infrastructure to be able to kind of counter strat it a little bit, I'm actually going to count on Fnatic a little bit. Fnatic look really good in terms of their day-to-day adjustments all the way back in Reykjavik. Now, online, not exactly the finest work that we've seen from that team, but I think online we're going to see a bit more of a boosted Fnatic. In terms of the Brazil teams, I really don't have that much faith. We'll see with Heat Stars right now that they got the dream team more or less that they wanted with Heat and MW Zera. But I think otherwise for the NA teams, we aren't looking too high up in terms of hopes, but I still think that Envy, in terms of the moves that they ended up making all the way back in Berlin, I think they just showed us that they still have structure, that they have definitely a direction that they want to go with as a roster. But how is the team actually going to change now with their coaching staff? How are they going to react to that as a team in general? The meta, again, just hasn't changed all that much. So at this point, we're just going to see as much of a refined version of Envy as possible. With Sentinels changing as much, that's going to be versatile for sure. But I could definitely see EMEA just going forward and just sweeping this whole thing up. Gambit, Liquid, show me right. Why not? Why not? Show me up. Tell me I'm right. Tell me I'm right.
Yeah, when Naeem spoke with Zesh, he said he doesn't really feel threatened by any of the other regions, that he believes NA and EMEA is going to be the be-all, end-all battle throughout Champions. I kind of have to agree with him at this point. I would love to see another team come in and flip that on its head. Vision Strikers come in and just run the table or something to give us a good story. But, because as a journalist, that's what I want to see. But as a fan of Valorant, on the flip side, I just can't see that happening.
Right. How many times can you write an EUNA article, right?
Exactly.
How many more times can you do that?
Go ahead.
I'm just thinking though, at least for a lot of the players from the different regions, I mean, I don't see why not they could make such a big run, right? Because I mean, of course, it is going to come down to individual skill. It's going to come down to those nerves. And I think the real veteran presence is on the NA and the EMEA teams, purely because of the experience that they have with Counter-Strike. With a lot of the different players that we end up seeing on teams like X10 and Crazy Raccoons, we're only getting those players nowadays popping up in esports. They're getting great experience regionally, but they're not getting any experience barely out of their own countries. So it's the same effect that we ended up seeing seeing with like Sonics, that we ended up seeing with every other Masters team. It's just going to be very hard to try to, I guess you could say, replicate the pace that you see in a VOD and replicate it in game, because it's so much more daunting actually physically seeing your opponents come towards you than it is just trying to time it out on your own when you have that controlled environment and watching those VODs and trying to counter strat. Because again, so many things are going to change. It's going to be it's going to be crazy. I've said the word versatile a lot, and I think that's the theme of just this year in general. But going into this stage, every team is just that bit more shocking, and we could possibly see some team potentially like the Vision Strikers finally come out and have that run that we want, purely because they're just aiming one by one to their opponents with the right strat book.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I mean, at this point, there's plenty of time to prepare. There's months that some of these guys knew they were going to be at Champions, that they can just sit there and say, okay, what do we have to do to win this thing? So I really think, we're going to see NA and EMEA kind of do their thing as the powerhouses, but I really think there will be some surprises from some of the other regions, at least in terms of how they play, or perhaps even some upsets here and there.
Yeah, I think so. Now, exactly which teams are going to make those upsets, don't ask me. Please don't. Please don't ask me. I have no clue.
Yeah, me either. But so, just let us know what's next for you. Kind of end it, pimp yourself out a little bit for everybody.
Sure. I'll pimp myself out, MTV Cribs, all that. So, yeah, guys, I'm going to be around more other games throughout the next few months. I'm not going to be doing as much Valorant. I'll be back at Valorant in around January or February. But until then, I'll be around Counter-Strike. If you guys just want to catch up with like any of the random casts that I do, follow me on Twitter at @upmind_. Otherwise, I don't stream as much, but please follow me on there, twitch.tv/upmind. I think otherwise, please enjoy Valorant, enjoy the game, support the scene, support the casters, support the players, and of course, support Run It Back.
Thank you so much for the plug. Thank you so much for your time. I honestly had a blast talking with you.
Thank you.
Out of all the writing gigs I have and all the jobs that I find, I just love talking about and watching Valorant and seeing, the talent and the players and everything. It's just so fun. I would rather sit here for 8 hours and watch a Valorant tournament than probably do any other kind of work in the world, because it's honestly the dream, and I know you're living your dream. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me for, I know we didn't want to go for an hour. We're at 42 minutes, so we're pretty close.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Well, take care, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.